Welcome to Political Theory Through Anime, presented by the Foundation for the Preservation of Gen 1 Pokemon.
You may remember us as the people who did the Gen 5 Isn't Pokemon panel yesterday. If not, I'm deeply offended that you don't love us more.
You have not yet learned the truth about Gen 5 Pokemon, but we'll do that one again.
Actually, so if you could find some more. One there is fine, but if you both sit there,
We're trying to
record.
yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Oh god, there's so many people.
Anyway, in
You're all gonna be
association
disappointed.
with the Cato Institute and the Center for American Progress. JK, they're a bunch of cucks. So you may be thinking, oh, these guys, we know what they're going to do. This is going to be chaos and memes, and the first anime we're going to talk about is Hetalia. Oh, wait, no, we're not going to, there's no Hetalia in this panel. If you're looking for Hetalia or Pokemon, you're going to be a little disappointed.
Some of you may also be expecting assorted random Embor slides inserted throughout the panel, in which we, feign surprise and alarm that the slideshow that we made has those slides that we put in there in it. But no, we are not doing that either. This is a no meme zone, completely serious, we promise.
You didn't? I didn't pay. I want it back.
Oh, there's one more? All right.
We're prepared.
Oh,
Finally, if you were expecting us to make Captain Planet environmentalism references, this is the only one.
There's none of those.
Recycle your stuff. Don't be a jerk.
I guess.
So we have our totally legit Code Geass clip here. Totally legal. Where'd my mouse go?
Maybe next time we do this panel, we'll take a moment to talk about intellectual property theory.
This is totally fair use, we swear.
All right.
Show yourself, Zero! I'll escort you safely out of the country myself, I guarantee it!
I don't wish to be in your debt, Suzaku. However, I have a question. What does it mean to be Japanese? A nation?
What?
Is it language? Territory? Bloodlines?
No, that's not it! It's in the heart!
Then we're in agreement. A feeling within. A belonging. Dignity. Pride. The culture is carried in the heart. You're Japanese no matter where you are.
All right, and that's that. So that is the first question, because the anime Code Geass, I assume everybody's seen this, right?
Thank you.
Why are you here if you haven't seen Code Geass? You should be marathoning this right now.
I'm giving this panel and I haven't seen it.
I also have not seen Code Geass, full disclosure. That's why he's talking about this.
Okay. It's great. It's got Johnny Young Bosch. Code Geass, for those of you who are not familiar with the storyline, is about a alternate timeline in which the country of Japan is an occupied colony referred to as Area 11 by the Britannian Empire, which is actually based in America. And so they've been colonized, and it's a story of a national liberation movement. So the important issue, and this is actually something that Lelouch and Suzaku are both in agreement on, is the question of what does it mean to be Japanese, to have a national identity. And so they offer a few ideas. It could be language, which some people have claimed in political theory. It could be territory, and it could be bloodlines. But Suzaku instead says that it's actually a feeling in your heart, in your kokoro, if you want to be weeby about it. And Lelouch agrees, which is a nice thing. So let's see. Nation as a feeling within. This is a map of the Japonic language family. If you want to claim that the Japanese nation is based on language, you see you've got some Western Japanese, which is where you get your weird Kansai accent. Then you've got Eastern Japanese. Hachujo is an endangered dialect. And then up in the north, though, there used to be, not so much today, a distinct language of the Ainu people, the indigenous peoples of Hokkaido. According to UNESCO, as of 1996, there are now only 15 speakers of the Ainu language. It is most likely going to be a dead language within our lifetimes. There will be no more people who can actually speak this language. So Hokkaido used to be culturally and linguistically distinct from Japan, but during the Muromachi period, during the
Yeah, go for it.
Sure.
Yeah.
During the Muromachi period, peoples from northern Honshu, which would be the largest island here, started moving to Hokkaido, and over the course of a few hundred years, destroyed the Ainu culture and assimilated whatever remaining people there were of the Ainu into speaking Japanese. And then down in the south, the southern islands, they spoke Ryukyuan, which is a distinct language that is mutually unintelligible with Japanese. This started being phased out in the late 1800s after Japan formally claimed the Ryukyuan Islands as part of their territory. So if you were to claim that Japanese as a nation is based on language, today this is what you would see, all of this, but it was not always this way. There have been claims to linguistic nationalism, most notably in Europe. A lot of the German nationalists and people seeking German unifications based their ideas on the fact that people spoke the same Germanic language despite being spread throughout Switzerland, Austria, Prussia, various smaller German states. And so there was some claim that national identity should be based on language. But there have also been nations that have existed speaking multiple languages. Our friends to the north, Canada, speak both English and French and have a distinct Canadian national identity. They have a functional nation state. The Austro-Hungarian Empire spoke multiple languages, and also one of the most successful national identities is Switzerland, where they speak 4 languages and are super, super Swiss about everything. So language in and of itself does not necessarily guarantee that there is a common identity or that all people of a language share an identity. So the next idea offered, which they're going to throw out, is territory. This is a map of Japanese territory. So Japan has about 377,000 square kilometers of land and 3,000 square kilometers of territorial waters. So territorial waters are, you can essentially treat it like a border in the ocean. If you cross into that, you are crossing into Japan. But then, and this is from the Japanese Coast Guard, they also have 430,000 square kilometers of an exclusive economic zone, which is a buffer zone around territorial waters in which a country can claim exclusive rights to natural resources, including fishing, offshore oil drilling, offshore wind farming, anything like that. The Japanese government just last month completed a survey and report on a few hundred islands that they are planning on claiming as Japanese territory, most of which are uninhabited.
What's that spot that where them and the Chinese are kind of beefing over it? Those I can't think of the name of the island.
Senkaku. That is these down here.
Yeah, there's been a lot of rumblings about that for the last about 3 years now.
Yes.
They've been, they've been claiming the Japanese or the Chinese have been going over there saying that this is their spot and then overflying and then offending the Japanese, and the Japanese go right back saying, That's our spot. I think somebody owns one of the islands or owns a piece of it in Japan.
Yes, there have been private owners. There's currently no residents, and most of the islands that Japan is planning on now claiming as national territory are uninhabited. And the only reason they want to claim these is because when you claim another bit of territory further away from the mainland, you also get to push your exclusive economic zone out further.
It's like 60 miles.
Yeah. Well, already it's from the borders of their current land.
Yeah.
So that if you get a piece of land that's 5 miles further away, then you get to push everything 5 miles further. So that's what they're doing. But claiming the nation has to be tied to territory is also a little strange because you're claiming territory that nobody lives on, nobody really does anything with. Is kind of a joke. Next, we get to the idea of bloodlines, which is an unfortunately common idea. So if you Google dictionary and nation, you will come up with a large aggregate of people united by common descent, history, culture, or language, inhabiting a particular country or territory. One of the earliest mentions of the idea of a nation comes from Herodotus writing about the Persian Wars and trying to distinguish Greeks from Persians. Said that the kinship of all Greeks in blood and speech and the shrines of gods and the sacrifices that we have in common and the likeness of our way of life was one of the reasons that Greeks should not side with Persians. And then one of the most distinct ethnic nationalist movements of the 20th century was Nazism in Germany. This is a quote from Hitler, which was spread throughout Austria in the run-up to the annexation. He claimed that those of the same blood belong to the same right. So this was an idea of what defines a nation, but this isn't what Suzaku and Lelouch believe in. They don't think that it's about blood. They think it's about a feeling within, which is what John Stuart Mill claimed. Oh, I almost forgot this slide. This is Mussolini on having a national identity based on race. It is a feeling, not a reality. National pride has no need of the delirium of race. He also agrees that unity of speech is not decisive in this matter. He also cited the Austro-Hungarian Empire as well as various ancient empires that spoke multiple languages, but were still united in identity. He also discusses immigration and assimilation, and that Italians, having moved to America, incorporate themselves into America. They don't have to be Italian all their life. They don't even have to owe loyalty to the Italian state. This is actually somewhat interesting considering who Mussolini sided with in World War II. This is an interview he gave in 1933, speaking to a Jewish journalist, Emil Ludwig, original name Kohn. So this is his take on national identity. And then here we have John Stuart Mill. Finally, we get to the idea of it being in the heart. It's national identity is really just a feeling. He says, a portion of mankind may be said to constitute a nationality if they are united among themselves by common sympathies which do not exist between them and any others. This feeling of nationality may have been generated by various causes. The strongest is political antecedents, national history, and community of recollections, collective pride, humiliation, pleasure, regret. So it's the culture that can be carried within your heart. And the idea that a national sympathy is really just two people feeling the same thing towards each other. Any group, if they all feel a certain way, can claim to be a nationality. He goes on to claim that this is useful in utilitarian terms, as people who share common sympathies with each other are more productive in a cooperative society. Now, some people in Japan, I think they took this whole bit about it being a feeling in your heart a little bit too seriously. This is an actual Japanese political party called 日本の心を大切にすると. Literally, the party that cares about the Japanese kokoro. They are the most adorable nationalist party in the world.
Super moe.
They are the moe nationalists, but they're still kind of jerks. So I Google translated their bullet points, and then I had somebody who actually can read Japanese tell me what they were saying. And so their vague bullet points are they want to make the Japanese economy great again. Japan, in case you're not aware, has a population crisis. Their population's declining because people are dying faster than new children are being born. And so their solution, no, they don't want immigration. Immigration is bad, according to them. They want people to make more babies. They don't really lay out how they're going to get this done, but make some Japanese babies. And this is where it gets a little weird. We aim to instruct and raise Japanese people who hold the true historical perspective and moral values and a high level of academics. What I think that this is referring to, this is a spin-off of another Japanese party called Nippon Ishin no Kai, which means the Japan Restoration Party, literally the people who want to make Japan great again. And their founder, a guy named Ishihara Shintaro, has talked repeatedly about how he doesn't think that that whole thing that happened in China was such a big deal in the 1930s. So when they talk about the true history, it sounds kind of like they want to just take the history textbooks and all that awkward stuff they don't want to talk about. Just, yeah. But they are super moe and nationalists. Yeah.
A little bit.
So they've agreed on what is a nation, but why does a nation matter? Because a nation is not a government. A government is a state. So it is a human community that claims the monopoly on the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory. This is from a German sociologist, Max Weber. He was very influential in the field of social science. So it's not the same thing. So in the case of Code Geass, the Japanese nation is being ruled as a colony of the Britannian Empire. They are the group that has claimed monopoly on the legitimate use of force. And people have a problem with nations and states not being aligned. They feel as though they are not being ruled by the right people. There are a number of stateless nations in existence today. Here are two that have been in the news recently. You have the Kurds, who are distributed. They're a group of people who feel a common identity, but are distributed across Turkey, Armenia, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. There is no national government of the Kurdish people. There's quasi-states in northern Iraq. They have a lot of autonomy. They've claimed a free Kurdish state in Syria, but they've been heavily repressed in Turkey and Iraq. And then we also have the other map is the Tuareg people who are distributed throughout Africa and view themselves as having a distinct national cultural identity, but do not have a government of their own. Most recently, there was a rebellion in 2012 of a Tuareg insurgent group. And then there's also occupation, which is what's happening with Area 11. You had a complete whole nation state that was then colonized by another. And so what Suzaku and Lelouch agree on, though they differ in their means, is that peoples are not to be handed about from one to a sovereignty to another, that they should be able to direct their own state. And so dividing them or colonizing is inappropriate. And they disagree on how to achieve this. Suzaku believes that the best response is to maintain the Britannian state. It is thank you. It's wrong to rebel against the government and threaten the authority of the state because going back to a Hobbesian idea of the natural state or the state of nature, Hobbes believes that nature, people exist in a continual fear and danger of violent death, the life of man solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Some anthropologists who've studied pre-modern societies have come to the conclusion. Nicholas Chagnon worked a lot in South America. Have come to the conclusion that without a state, society often does devolve into anarchy, feuds, personal as well as feuds between groups with kinship ties. And so Hobbes's idea is that in order to maintain civility in a society, you had to have people surrender their claim to use violence to a sovereign. You had to have some kind of government over people. And so this exists both at the local level, and he also claimed that where it truly existed in his time, not as much today, is that this exists in the state of international relations as well. All of these states and independent sovereigns are then just going to be able to war against each other. It's the war of all against all. And King Charles, the King of Britannia, is pretty okay with this idea. He wants to go around conquering other people, just take their stuff, and he's generally a jerk. Whereas Lelouch believes that on the international level, you also need to have a sort of sovereign. You need some kind of system above the nation state to keep the nation states from warring with each other and going around conquering. He proposes this initially through the idea of a United Federation of Nations, which would be similar to the UN that we have in the real world. And then later is sort of executed in a way of imposing a monarchy on the world, which still achieves, in some ways, ending international conflict. Hobbes's ideas of a sovereign included the idea that you could have a monarchy, you could have all power vested in a single individual, you could have an aristocracy, which would be the power being consolidated in a small group of individuals, or you could have a democracy in which the power is distributed amongst the peoples. Now, on the levels of the international system, there was briefly an international monarchy in Code Geass, if you've seen it, in which one person claimed rule over the entire world. To a certain extent, you could say that there was almost an international aristocracy, and that you had the Britannian Empire, you had the Asian, I forget their alliance. There was an alliance in Asia as well as a European alliance. And then there's also a democracy, which would be the idea of having a United Federation of Nations in which all nations get to vote on everything. But how do you achieve this? Suzaku maintains that you can't overthrow the Britannian state. It's just going to create more conflict, which is something that Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher, claimed that the state is necessary to keep man out of the state of nature. And so any attempt to remove the sovereign would revert man to a state of nature, and you would have anarchy. He believed it was okay for passive disobedience, but not to revolt. Hobbes as well supported absolute monarchy, believing that it was the best way to maintain order and keep man out of the state of nature. Lelouch, on the other hand, claims that if the government doesn't represent the will of the people, it doesn't have a legitimacy to it. So this is an idea that's supported by John Locke, who wrote treatises on rights and discussed revolution, who was very influential on the founding fathers of the United States when they believed that King George's impositions on them were untenable, and so they had a right to rebel against the government. Another philosopher who claimed that was Ayn Rand, who believed that all rights were held at the individual level. Any state that does not respect individual rights has no right to rule. We also have the issue of social Darwinism, which is promoted by the Britannian Empire. Again, they went fairly heavy-handed, drawing on some real-world ideas, trying to show you that these people are bad. So this term is actually popularized by an American historian, Richard Hofstadter, who is also the author of The Paranoid Style in American Politics, in which he viewed it as having two distinct implications. There was employing it at the national level and then at the international level. And he claimed that people who employed it at the national level saw this as justifying the use of eugenics and the sorting of people into economic strata in a laissez-faire capitalist system, which is claimed that the Britannian aristocracy has a right to be aristocrats because they're better than everyone else. And they claim that that is then genetic. Its international implications is people also drew upon these ideas to claim the superiority of some nations over others. Ernst Haeckel, a German biologist, while he was a somewhat serious biologist, also started delving into racial biology and claiming the superiority of Caucasian peoples, laying the groundwork in Germany for later Nazis to draw upon. And so these are the ways in which the Britannian Empire has drawn upon those ideas.